In this video, I will be discussing the Ara Pacis altar, covering the context surrounding its creation, as well as its connection to Mussolini and the fascist regime of Italy in the mid-1900s. Through doing so, I hope to illustrate some of the connections between art and propaganda and the manner in which ancient culture can be co-opted in order to further modern-day causes. To begin, let's cover where and what the Ara Pacis is. The Ara Pacis was constructed in Rome only a decade before the birth of Christ, in honor of Augustus Caesar's recent military victories in modern-day France and Spain. The monument consists of large stone walls surrounding an open-air altar that was used for ritual sacrifices associated with the Roman state religion. The screens of the enclosure were decorated with stone reliefs depicting mythological scenes of various Roman gods and heroes, and processional scenes of solemn figures marching to engage in rituals similar to which would take place on the altar itself. On the northern wall, we can see a representation of Emperor Augustus, garbed in the robes of a priest, and nearby on the western wall there is a depiction presumably of the mythological demigod Aeneas, a warrior whom Augustus admired and wished to align himself with. By placing the likenesses of both him and this great warrior on the same monument, the emperor hoped to convey a sacred endorsement of his title, similar to the manner in which Egyptian pharaohs claimed their power came from the gods. The Ara Pacis was dedicated to Pax, the Roman god of peace, which may seem ironic considering that a military campaign was the catalyst event for its creation. This belies the ulterior motive of dedicating the altar to the abstract notion of peace, which was primarily intended as a political message to signify that Augustus had finally restored peace and prosperity to the Roman state after decades of civil war. Augustus desired absolute power, but understood that the Roman people were very wary of monarchies, so he tried to fashion himself as a humble man of the Roman people who had been chosen by the gods for his virtue. In fact, his unofficial title of princeps translates to the paradoxical phrase, first among equals. With its proclamation of Roman prosperity, with Augustus at the helm, the Ara Pacis was a cunning and deceptive propaganda piece establishing the legitimacy of the Roman Empire. Over the following centuries, the Ara Pacis became lost to the ages, until some fragments were found in 1568 and were dispersed around Europe to various museums. Many of these pieces have never been returned to Italy, including those that now reside in the Louvre. No further discoveries were made until 1859, when more fragments were unearthed, and German art historian Friedrich von Thun connected the dots between the fragments and the altar mentioned by Emperor Augustus in his journals. However, despite this revelation, further excavation did not begin until 1903, and even then progress was slow. By 1937, technological advancements allowed for the excavation of more fragments of the Ara Pacis, and Mussolini directed architect Vittorio Ballio Moporgo to construct an enclosure for the restored altar, surrounded by buildings adorned with fascist iconography. When Mussolini seized control of the Italian government in the 1920s, he understood the sway of the Roman legacy in Italy and made Romanità, or Romanness, a cornerstone of his political platform. Mussolini, like many authoritarian leaders, promised to make his country great again and cast himself as the continuation of the Roman imperial line, much in the way Augustus claimed his direct descendants from Aeneas. The co-opting of ancient culture and symbology to benefit a current cause is a common political tactic used to play on nostalgia, especially by conservative parties, whose platforms promise a return to tradition. While humanity must indeed look to the past to determine our future, we must also remain wary of groups that appropriate messages from long before our time to suit their own agenda, and the Ara Pacis is a prime example of this. Mussolini's restoration of the Ara Pacis was not just for the sake of conservation, but also functioned as a claim to the Italian people that Augustus himself endorsed Mussolini's rule, despite the fact that these men lived worlds and millennia apart.